Okay, today's lecture is on the Russian Revolution. So we have to start with Tsar Nicholas II. He took the throne in 1894 in Russia. He was an autocratic ruler, meaning he wanted absolute power. He has this quote: "The principle of autocracy will be maintained by me as firmly and unswervingly as by my lamented father, Alexander III, who was a really, really, really mean and just powerful guy who didn't really care. So Nicholas wanted to kind of continue that tradition in Russia. Nicholas II refused to give up any power, and he used secret police to enforce his power. Although he never really wanted to be czar, he is going to be seen as relatively weak and ineffective as a ruler. That's Nicholas brought there. So, economic growth and its impact. So, Russia started to industrialize and have more and more factories between 1863 and 1900. So, we're backtracking a little bit here from World War One. They were definitely behind the rest of Europe in terms of industrialization, but they started to have a growing middle class that we're going to call the proletariat. Now, with the rapid industrialization comes some problems. Terrible working conditions, people wanted political power, a huge gap between rich and poor, and we're going to see some revolutionary movements begin to grow as people want more say in their government. And we're going to see two groups kind of emerge by 1903, the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. Now, the Mensheviks wanted popular support for the revolution. So basically, kind of like a democracy where everybody agrees on certain new rules and regulations to kind of support the working class. And there's the Bolsheviks. They wanted a small number of people that would basically are willing to give up everything for the revolution and were a lot more intense. And they're led by a guy named V.I. Lenin. And Lenin's got this super engaging personality, really good organizer, completely ruthless. And he's actually going to flee to Germany to avoid arrest while Tsar Nicholas II is still in power. There's V.I. Lenin. So in 1905, we have something called the Bloody Sunday. 200,000 workers and their families marched on the Tsar's palace, basically with a petition saying, hey, treat us better, give us freedoms. They wanted something kind of like a constitutional monarchy like Britain had. The Tsar wasn't home when they went to his palace, and so the generals ordered the soldiers that were on guard at the Tsar's home to just fire upon the crowd. And they did, killing 500 to 1,000 unarmed people. And we call this Bloody Sunday. There's a video, if you'd like to pause this video and watch that one. This is a good time to do that now. Now, after the Bloody Sunday, the wave of violence and protest all over Russia because of just how unfair this was. The Tsar's soldiers basically killed completely innocent people just asking for more say in their government. And Nicholas II promises more freedoms and actually creates what's called the Duma in 1905, which is Russia's first parliament, kind of similar to the parliament in Britain. However, he ends up dissolving it in 10 weeks, so it's kind of short-lived. He basically does it as a band-aid to make the people not hate him as much for a little while, but he really had no intention of giving up any real power that he had. Now World War I happens. So Russia, not ready for World War I. Their leaders are pretty much weak. Their troops are poorly equipped. They haven't truly industrialized, and they're going to have a lot of casualties within the first year, 4 million. That's people who are injured, dead, or missing. By 1915, Nicholas II moves to the war front to try to motivate his troops. So, be one with the soldiers. And he leaves his wife in charge of the government. Well, it's problematic. Tsarina Alexandra is actually from Germany, which is Russia's enemy in World War I. So already people don't trust her. And then she leaves her trust in a guy named Rasputin instead of the trusted advisors, which is also not a great move for her. Let's talk about Rasputin. So he is a holy man, heavy drinker, and probably on some other things as well, a womanizer. And Zarzina is completely taken by him because he says that he can solve her son's hemophilia. Hemophilia is a terrible disease where it's really difficult to stop bleeding. So you can bleed to death for relatively minor wounds and cuts. And basically, Rasputin takes on a really, really important role in the government. And the people of Russia just don't trust him, don't trust her, and things just get really, really bad for Tsar Nicholas II. Eventually, a group of revolutionaries is going to murder Rasputin, actually. And there's a video on Rasputin if you'd like to pause this video and watch that one now. He's creepy, right? All right, the March Revolution. March 1917, women textile workers in Petrograd strike over a bread shortage, screaming, bread, bread. There's lots of problems, economic problems by 1917. Problems in terms of just supplying the troops by that point, and the soldiers were ordered to shoot the protesters, similar to what had happened at Bloody Sunday in 1905, except for this time, the soldiers say no, and they actually turned to their officers, killing their officers who gave them the command, and joined the protesters in the bread shortage. After this, the Tsar steps down. Violence spreads all over Russia. He's completely, basically has no one on his side at this point. He's forced to abdicate the throne, meaning to step down, and he and his entire family are actually going to end up being dead within a year. There's a quick video on what happened to the family if you'd like to pause this now. So there's the Tsar and his family, and this is the famous story of Anastasia, his daughter, who supposedly wasn't murdered and lived on. So the Tsar steps down. Leaders of the Duma establish a provisional government, super temporary, led by a guy named Alexander Kerensky. Russia had tons of problems, though. They're still in war. There's still food shortages. Revolutionaries begin forming Soviets, and the whole thing's kind of a mess. And the Soviets end up being more powerful than this provisional government, and you start to see a split that will eventually lead to a civil war. Now, Lenin, the leader of the Bolsheviks, who's hanging out in Germany, while he's in Germany, he's learned all about Marxist views and communist views and really becoming a true communist. And the Germans see this as an opportunity to get Russia out of the war. So they actually send Lenin on a secret train back to Russia in hopes that he would end the war between Russia and Germany, which he does, and lead the Bolsheviks in a revolution in Russia. And so, smart move on the Germans because it totally works. Lenin and the Bolsheviks, they seize power from this provisional government, and they gain control of the city of Petrograd, which is in the middle of Russia. And they use the slogan peace, land, and bread, which are things that the people really wanted. They wanted out of the war, and they wanted land, and they wanted bread. They wanted food. They wanted supplies. The provisional government topples in November 1917, and the Bolsheviks storm the provisional government in a coup d'etat and basically take over. Civil war rages between the Bolsheviks, now known as the Red Army, and the everyone else, basically. The Mensheviks, prior leaders or loyalists to the Tsar. Basically, anyone else who wasn't a Bolshevik is considered in the White Army. The Civil War rages from 1918 to 1920. About 15 million Russians die during this Civil War. Even Western nations like the United States try to support the White Army, but the Red Army wins. So here's an image of the brutalities of the Russian Civil War. So then the Red Army eventually crushed opposition. White Army loses. The Red Army is led by a guy named Trotsky. He's their military general. And this showed that the Bolsheviks not only could take the power in the coup d'etat, but they could keep power. So here's Lenin. He's kind of your political leader. And there's Trotsky. He's more of the military leader of the Bolsheviks. So Lenin restores order by some political reforms. He renames the Bolsheviks the Communist Party, reorganizes the government into a Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, also known as the USSR, so it's no longer considered Russia. Divides Russia into self-governing republics under the central government of Moscow, and basically holds all power using the army and secret police to maintain control of that new power. The war and the revolution completely destroyed the Russian economy, and so Lenin, despite being a true communist, actually abandons communist ideals and has the economy run like a capitalist economy to get it moving again. Call this the new economic policy. It fixes Russia's economy, but he always knew that it would be temporary. Now, fortunately, Lenin dies in 1924 of a brain hemorrhage, in other words, bleeding of the brain. This was after a couple strokes. And his death is going to lead to a huge power struggle. Who's going to lead this new SSR? Who's going to lead this new communist collection of Soviets, which are kind of like states in a way? Will it be Stalin, who was a political leader kind of with Lenin, or is it going to be this Trotsky guy who's the military general who helped win the Civil War? So this is going to be the world's first communist government, and already the first communist government is in mistrust with the democratic countries like the United States. And so we'll see this play out in the Cold War much later. So here's Lenin's tomb. He's seen as like a god in Russia. For over 65 years, you could go to his tomb and see this really, really creepy, preserved part of his body. But yeah, it's almost godlike how people in Russia believe in Lenin and worship him. Kind of creepy.